Need to know his powers.
I'll forward it to you. I looked.
All right, we are live now. And we have 44 viewers.
There we go.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, let's find out if they can hear us. Can you guys hear us? This is my favorite part, waiting for an answer in the comments. Okay, they can hear us.
All right.
All right, so should I go through my quick update, Jasmine, while people are still joining us real quick? And then
Absolutely.
Craig, his thing?
What's going on with COVID today?
Yeah, that'd be great. What's this thing, COVID?
This thing, COVID. You guys might have seen this dispatch determinant called pandemic. It's new. Okay, let me pull up the stuff. And here it is, today's COVID. Good, hopefully you guys can all see this. This is this afternoon's update from the dashboard from the state. And you can see our case counts continue to rise slowly. It's worth pointing out that had a few more deaths, unfortunately. We're up to 37 deaths. And if you do the quick math, 37 over 729 equals about a 5% mortality rate for confirmed positive cases. And that's pretty high, actually, higher than is being reported some other places. It's probably worth remembering the age distribution of our cases and the fact that a good number of these more recent cases are occurring in long-term care facilities among people with some significant underlying comorbidities. So that's the basic stance where we're at. But it might be interesting to just talk about what flattening the curve means for a second. So this one, hopefully you can see, and just talk about quickly the difference between a straight number of cases where the curve looks like this, straight up and down here, and eventually, hopefully, will level off and decrease. But this is the straight value, and then here's the logarithmic value. And so what we're actually talking about is a rate of increase in cases that we're trying to flatten. So trying to make it so that this curve didn't look like concave upward, which would mean the rate of increase is increasing. So we don't want a curve that looks like this. We ideally want a curve that looks like this and flattens. And you can see that we were steeper here and we're maybe starting to shallow out a little bit. So that's good. That's kind of what we wanted. And sorry for scrolling fast, but I want to get to a bigger picture of it. Again, here's a logarithmic scale. So you can see each line is 10 times more down here. And this is what we're talking about. The curve was very steep in the beginning, and then we want it to flatten out as we go along. And so it's just important to remember that while the curve is flattening, there are continuing to be new cases. There will continue to be new cases. The expression flattening the curve doesn't mean prevent any cases. It means slow the rate of increase in cases. And I think at this point we can say it does appear that that has happened. And I think we'd all like to think that our social distancing and sacrifices that everybody's been making has some impact on that and has been somewhat successful. I suppose there are a few schools of thought out there that say that probably would have happened anyway, even if we had all just gone about our normal lives. I'm not sure I agree with that, but just thought it was interesting for a second to talk about what really flattening the curve actually means, because I think there's some confusion over that. So I'll stop there and see if there's any just introductory questions. It does not look like it. So Craig, I think you had something to share.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry that I'm not on more frequently, but balancing a lot of things like budget and whatnot. We can remain condition yellow system-wide. Calls and transports are still down from our normal levels, but they remain pretty flat for our new normal, as Doc was saying. I think, as the stay-at-home is lifted, we should expect a lot of pent-up demand for medical services, whether it's folks with elective surgery or finally the medical symptoms that they've been putting off treatment for. I think people, as they get out on the streets, we're going to see that as an uptick. For example, we've seen a rash of water rescue calls and boat fires when people are out boating instead of going to the beach. So I think a lot of that will be part of what's going on. Something really incredible is that we still remain 0 COVID positive patients from a workplace exposure. And that really is just incredible. That is everyone's effort every day, every call, to just be on top of that. So just incredible. I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce a thank you for not staying home video for fire, EMS, and 911, that when everybody was safely at home, you all were out on the streets doing the job, putting yourself in harm's way. And so answering the calls, dealing with frantic callers and everything else that comes with it. So Jasmine and a group put together a video, and we'll show it up in just a moment here. But I did want to say that from all of us to all of you, thank you for your professionalism, for putting yourself in harm's way, for being away from your family, for your patience with all of our operational and protocol changes, for your diligence in wearing protective equipment day and night. Our efforts for fire and EMS have been a solid force throughout this response, and it has been very notable and appreciated by our government and local leaders at all levels. I've heard that, just across the board. And so on behalf of Pinellas County includes the County Commission, the County Administrator's Office, the Executive Policy Group, Emergency Management, the Response and Operations Coordination Committee. I asked if I could thank all of you from all of them, and they agreed. Our EMS Advisory Council, our EMS Medical Control Board, our Hospital Working Group, on behalf of the COVID-19 Fire and EMS Unified Command. So that includes Chief Slatterer, Chief Womack, Dr. Jameson, Richard Champ, and me. On behalf of the fire chiefs, the Sunstar Paramedics Management Team, Regional 911, the Medical Director, our Safety and Emergency Services Director, Jim Fogarty, just on behalf of all of that collective group, thank you for all that you're doing and continue to do. And I think that you'll get a kick out of this video. Thank you all.
Fire Tech Bravo, Rescue 17, Pandemic 667B, Rescue 17, Fire Tech Bravo.
We will get this out far and wide, and try to get as many people to see this as possible. And thanks again.
Yeah, well said, Craig and Jasmine. Nice work. Can't say it any better than that. It's just been really, really impressive. Somebody said when we started all of this, and everybody seemed like they were kind of a little fearful and a little apprehensive about what might be coming down the pike. Somebody said, "Yeah, but this group is going to shine." And sure, they were right. It's really impressive. Really is. So with that, I think we will take any questions that the group watching live has and do our best to answer them. Let's see. I'll give a quick update while we're waiting for the first round of questions. Is that I mentioned previously on the first responder testing for antibodies that the rules had changed a little bit, and we have a potential plan to move forward. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like or how many people it's going to involve, whether it's going to be the whole system or some subset of the system. But we have had some really good discussions with some partners who may be able to help us get this done. So I don't have all the details to share yet, but I want to let you guys know that that project is not dead. We are still working to bring that to fruition for you. All right, here we go. Dan says, how many patients are presenting with DVTs or other signs and symptoms of DIC clotting issues in individuals that are otherwise healthy? Yeah, this is a big issue that's starting to come up. There's some even protocols that people are sharing among the medical community of folks dealing with these patients in the ICUs that they are aggressively anticoagulating these people. Consider, are you taking off, Craig?
Yeah, I'm going to leave. Everybody be safe. Thanks.
So they are aggressively anticoagulating people. And in some cases, think like continuous TPA infusion, really kind of aggressive stuff, really aggressive. And then anticoagulating them for a long time, even after they recover. So this is something that's up and coming, Dan. I don't know that we totally understand this yet. I've been hearing about it a little bit from the folks that I'm admitting these patients to from the ER. But I don't think that, like a lot of other things with this virus, I don't think that we have a full understanding or a full knowledge or appreciation for exactly how this works yet. I think one theory is that, particularly in the folks that do poorly with the virus, there is a phase of the disease process that's characterized by a really sort of out of control inflammatory process. And that's the type of thing where you would maybe see like a DIC kind of a picture, but we don't know yet. But this is a thing that people are experiencing, at least from an anecdotal or personal experience kind of a thing while they're taking care of COVID patients, and something that's actively being looked at. All right, next one is, what are some things that we are going to do to be better prepared as a county in the event this happens again in the future? Do we have any lessons learned yet? So I think it's a little bit early on. An expert that I listen to a lot said the other day that he thinks we are in the second inning of this, if you want to use a baseball analogy. And so it's probably a little bit early to have that kind of lessons learned. But certainly there are some things that I'm writing down as we go along. I think our pandemic plan needed to be updated, and I think we've done that in large part. And I think we have a good kind of all hazard approach to that. I think that the clinical tools regarding PPE and the clinical tools regarding crisis standards of care is something that we're going to have to keep in our back pocket going forward. whether for another wave of COVID or whatever the next virus that happens to try to paralyze the world is. I think it's good that we take the lessons learned, the things we've developed for this, and keep them. Brandon, well, I'm gonna get to that in a second. I think also that we figured out that in general, we're probably kind of lax on our PPE on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a flu patient or a MRSA patient or anything like that. I think this has been an interesting wake-up call for us that that maybe we need to be a little bit more diligent every day, not just when there's a pandemic going on. I think we've certainly learned things about preparedness in terms of how much of certain equipment we might have on hand. Or, when was the last time you went looking for your P100 mask since Ebola? I think for a lot of us, the answer is never since Ebola, and now something else came up and we needed to use them. So I think just our general approach to some of those PPE issues on a daily basis, as well as, for example, how many N95s we might keep stockpiled in the warehouse on any given day when it's, a regular sunny day out and there's not a pandemic. Those are the types of things that I think we're learning. The medicine behind this particular virus and disease process is going to teach us a lot as well, but that's still fairly early on. Brandon's asking who I'm referencing, and I'm going to pull up the website here so you guys can all just see the website. And so I think this is probably the easiest just to share it. So, I mean, there's a lot of people I'm trying to gain information from to guide what we're doing here. But this is a place that I think has got some pretty interesting information, and the folks here, particularly Dr. Osterholm, have a long track record of being pretty close to on the money when it comes to these types of events. If you never heard about him or watched him on the news or on the Joe Rogan Experience, he had a great episode on the Joe Rogan Experience a couple months ago when this first started. If you really want to get scared, look at that. If you want to see like another version of the Simpsons foretelling the future, go read the book he wrote 15 years ago or whatever it was, and it's almost a play-by-play of how this thing has turned out. So this is a guy that I think has really spent his entire career working in this field and has some pretty decent insight. I think sometimes he's a little bit maybe more dramatic than needs to be in terms of the way he frames things, but I think in general he's a good voice to listen to. He was certainly one of the very first people that a lot of EMS medical directors wanted to get on the line when this started, and in fact we had him on the line with us in the doctors meeting at the EMS Today meetings in Tampa right as this was all kicking off. And sure enough, most of the stuff he said has been pretty close. So this is his place, Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy out of University of Minnesota, and his name is Dr. Osterholm. So check him out as one voice, but certainly there's plenty of expert voices to listen to here. Billy, stop sucking up. All right, what else we got? Sure, you want it emailed or you want it in the comments? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Just Google SIDRAP. Here, I'll copy it and put it in the comments here. There you go. Again, that's one of several folks that I think have pretty good insight into this. There's a lot of people that work in this particular area, and but this is somebody that I've been paying attention for a long time. I mean, I went and studied infectious disease epidemiology before medical school. And this was somebody that was on my radar so long ago back then. All right, that's it. Everybody's quiet. We only have 65 this afternoon, so I'm not sure if we've got more questions or not. I don't want to drag this one out too long. So if you have questions, don't be shy, fire away. We'll get to them as best we can. And then I think we're still planning on having one on Tuesday. And then from there, we'll decide whether we need to continue twice a week or go to once a week after Tuesday. Okay, here you go. If there's a third, 2 EMTs, can one of the EMTs I'm not sure I totally understand this question, but if you're on a 3-person ambulance and you have, if you have a code, I think you're going to need more than one medic. So that's one piece of it. If you have a fairly stable patient and the EMT that's the third on the ambulance wants to ride in instead of the and participate in patient care instead of the fire medic who got there, who's generally there first, right, was the first person to the patient side. I think we've covered that is acceptable for a very stable patient, not for an alert, not for anything that's particularly sick patient, but for a stable patient. Yeah, I believe the EMT third we've said can be the person who rides in so that you have 2 in the back. Hopefully that answers your question, Simon, but if you have a question, hopefully that's able to be clarified by your chain of command folks using what we put out. Dan says, is there any distinct differences in signs, symptoms that we should be aware of in the 2 different strains that may affect patient presentation or potential? Great question, Dan. So there's a lot of debate still about these 2 types of COVID, the H type and the L type. And I'm not 100% convinced that those differences are related to genetic differences in the viruses themselves, as much as those 2 things may be on a continuum of disease. So there's a lot of people starting to think that you start out on the L type, which is sort of the lower acuity, more compliant lungs, not ARDS physiology where the lungs get really stiff and hard to ventilate, but just a little bit of maybe shortness of breath or hypoxia along with some pneumonia. And that those are the people who tend to do pretty good. They never really get too hypoxic. They just kind of go along and eventually get better. And that's probably what sort of most of the people that get it and have relatively mild courses look like. But then there's this sort of subset of patients that goes into a more ARDS slash sepsis slash multi-organ system involvement slash inflammatory storm overload kind of a picture. And that's what people say when they describe sort of the H type. But I think it still remains to be seen whether these are actually 2 separate disease processes or it's a continuum of disease. My suspicion is it's more a continuum of disease with certain people that are more likely to go into the other category. But I don't think we know that for sure yet. And so for us, I'm not sure that that's really applicable to us in the field. I think we should consider that anybody who is hypoxic or subjectively short of breath is potentially really, really sick and going into that sick category. And we should treat them as such, with the caveat that, you know, if we can't get their SAT above 85 in the pre-hospital, we're not necessarily going to be moving right to intubation. All right. Chief Burford says, continued value in completing wellness checks, temperatures, signs, symptoms on EMS personnel at the beginning of every shift. Yeah, I do believe we should continue doing that for the foreseeable future, Chief. I think until we know a better idea of the distribution of previous infection, current asymptomatic infection, and mild disease infection in our community, we don't have the full picture with this virus, and we probably ought to continue to make sure that, particularly in a place where you can't social distance as well, like a fire station or the cab of an ambulance or the 911 center, that we probably should continue doing that stuff to try and pick up anybody early before they could spread it to others. Marshall says, saw something about ECMO. Have you seen much on the use of it? I haven't seen ECMO taking off beyond the places that we're already doing ECMO, but I have heard at least anecdotal cases of people who got really, really sick, ended up on ECMO and came off ECMO and did well, including, I think, even one ER doctor that was the clinical course they had. So it is being used in some of the really severe cases. So the indication would be if you just cannot get them oxygenated on the ventilator, no matter what strategy you're using, then your other alternative is to oxygenate the blood outside the body and put it back in the body. So something that I think has some potential use in the situation, and certainly has been used to treat people, but I haven't seen it sort of rapidly growing beyond the places that already had programs. I was actually supposed to go to San Diego like in 2 weeks to get trained on how to initiate ECMO in the ER, but unfortunately that conference got postponed. So we'll do that in the fall. But certainly it was something that we were all thinking about in terms of oxygenating these otherwise not oxygenatable, that's not a word, but patients that we can't oxygenate any other way. Billy, temperatures in the system is a part of vital signs. Yeah, I know you guys have asked that question a long time. There's a couple of issues with that. The laser ones aren't reliable. The ear ones are not super accurate. The forehead ones are not super accurate. The under the tongue ones aren't necessarily correlating with a core body temperature that well. And so the options for temperature measurement for the pre-hospital arena are a little bit limited. In the ER, it's pretty routine that we will double check your triage oral or tympanic or forehead temperature with a rectal temperature. And if you're really sick, you're going to get a Foley catheter that has a temperature probe in it, and we'll measure an intra bladder temperature, which is fairly good for a core temperature. If you are really, really sick in the hospital, you'll probably get a central venous catheter that has a temperature probe in it, and we'll just measure it right there in your vena cava to get the core temperature. For EMS, so for example, when we used to do therapeutic hypothermia, we would drop a esophageal temperature probe, which is actually a really good way because it lays right on top of the aorta. And so we would drop an esophageal temperature probe just the same way you would drop an NG or OG tube in our cardiac arrests, and use that to guide our temperature management. Not really feasible in a lot of the patients that we would be interested in a temperature in. I think the rectal temperature is also somewhat problematic in an EMS environment. Just think of your athlete at a high school football game who's having a heat-related issue, and you want to, on the field in front of a few thousand people, check a rectal temperature. It doesn't seem like it would be a very fun experience for anybody. So I think there's some limitations to how we can do that in the pre-hospital arena. And I don't have a good solution that would give us a reliable clinical indicator that would change our pre-hospital management and be able to be done in a logistically reasonable way. So until we have those three criteria, I don't see us going to it. Not for lack, by the way, not for lack of having tried to find a solution that would work. We certainly have been around the block about 6 different times on temperatures for us. And I also am aware of a very funny anecdote. When a couple of years ago, one system clinician, possibly from the cab of their vehicle, called one of the online doctor services and happened to get my sister on the line. And she said, well, check your temperature. You're in an EMS vehicle. And the medic said, I don't have a thermometer. And my sister said, why not? And the medic said, ask your brother. And so one of you guys did that a couple of years ago, which I thought was absolutely hysterical. But no, we don't have thermometers, and we don't have a good plan to get us there at this point, which is a very long-winded way of saying no. Roger says, what are your thoughts about all the false reporting of COVID-19 patients, especially deaths? And how confident are you with the numbers being reported here in Florida? So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there, Roger. I have a very high level of confidence in the numbers that are coming out of the health department for confirmed cases. I also have a very high level of confidence in the numbers coming out of the health department, as well as coming out of the medical examiner for deaths. And I think there's been a little bit of a hyping of the differences there, which the differences were, to the best of my understanding, the differences are about case definitions and criteria that might be a little bit different between DOH and between the medical examiner, and also has to do with county of residence versus county of death. So for example, there was a Pinellas County resident, I believe, that died over in Hillsborough County, and there was two different ways that got reported. And in one method, I believe it got reported in Pinellas, and in one method, I believe it got reported in Hillsborough. So if the medical examiner reports the death by where it occurred and the health department reports the death by where you live, that causes a little bit of disparity. But in general, the numbers, even with that, the difference in numbers between what the ME shows me and what the health department shows me is minimal, if any. So I'm not sure that I think that there's a lot of statistical massaging or adjustment going on, to the best of what I can tell. So no, I don't think that there's any big issue there, at least not that I've seen. What else? I'm going to put on some music for Peg if you guys don't ask more questions. Peg, what do you want to hear today?
Did our EPCR update help? Is everybody doing okay with the EPCR out there? Also, if you were not in our last session, we were asking if you'd like to hear this or continue to see this twice a week or once a week. You can throw that in the comments.
So Pinellas Medic, are you talking about specifically COVID patients, or are you talking about any particular calls? If you're talking about specific COVID calls, we could probably do that, pull something together for next time. AC/DC. I don't have any AC/DC queued up. Sorry. But I like where you're going with Angus Young. Get it? Dave Young, Angus Jameson, Angus Young. No, that was really bad, right? It was really bad. All right, you guys have no more questions. We're going to cut it off. We got lots of things to do. All of the above, yeah. Sure, we can try and bring some cases once a week. Antibody, I did mention it briefly in the beginning, Chief. I don't have the definitive details, but I did mention that we had a little bit of progress. And so I'm hopeful again that we'll have a plan that we may be able to move forward with next week, but it's a little too early to say what that would look like, because there's a couple of parts that need to get nailed down soon before we know if it's a for sure thing. But fingers crossed.
All right. If we don't have anything else, I wanted to say thank you to everybody for everything you're doing out there, and just a reminder that as things open up, continue to wear your PPE and stay safe.
Great. Oh, Roger's still posting another one there. Yeah, Roger, again, I think that has to do with reporting whether whether COVID was the immediate cause of death or just a contributing factor to the death. Is those definitions that MEs use about how you classify a death are sometimes complicated. All right. I think that's it. Yeah, you good, Jasmine? Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's it.
You guys on Wednesday.
Next Tuesday.
Tuesday, that's it. So,
All right, stay safe out there, everybody.
take care.